The Gamers, Kyla's Rescue, written and narrated by C. Taylor, edited to meet YouTube guidelines. To purchase the unedited book, please click the link in the description. Chapter 8. Sky watched as the dark planet neared. It resided at the furthest reach of its solar system. There were few inhabitants, and the mushrooms they needed would be free to harvest. No one used them for the needed medication anymore since there were many other planets that weren't as unpleasant as this one to harvest from. They landed where the planet's distant suns still cast their dim light. Once the ramp lowered, they would also have to endure the stench that could not be escaped until they left the planet. She heard the soldiers assigned to the mission complain, and she couldn't blame them. It was her fault they were there, but she needed to do this if there was any hope Kyla would regain consciousness. She just wished it had been possible to do this by herself. Once they landed, they all made their way to the ramp. The moment the air seal released, there it was, a smell they would all be smelling in their noses for days. Sky was the first to leave the ship, scanning the ground, and found a patch of what they needed. She pointed out the mushrooms to the general, who showed them to his men before pointing their assigned areas to start picking. Sky worked quickly, carefully plucking the smelly but valuable fungus, making sure to get as much of the stem as possible and placing them into the bag that hung to her side. After working this way for a few hours, she had been able to find several patches, and her bag was nearly full. The general directed her back to the ship to start the process of extracting the antibiotic properties. He ordered the unused mushroom pulp be removed from the craft so it could be decontaminated before leaving the planet, as no one wanted to carry the smell back to the warship. Sky made her way back to the cruiser, gathering as much of the mushrooms as she could from the bottom of the ramp where the workers were leaving what they had found. The cruiser did have a small kitchen, which she needed for her work. Sky followed the instructions from the healer's manual. She shook them to remove as much dirt as possible, cut them into small pieces, and cooked them at a precise temperature for 20 minutes. Liquid from them collected at the bottom of the pan. Next, she would discard the mushroom pulp and keep the liquid. She would then have the helix process the rest. Processing the mountain of mushrooms already collected would produce maybe enough antibiotic to treat the people of Niobe, with some left for the soldiers' use. Sky had 5 batches heating, had enough mushrooms chopped for another 5, and had worked about halfway through what had been collected so far. She glanced out over the land when she went to gather some more for processing. The soldiers were now gathering very far away from the cruiser, having already gathered all they could closer. Sky grabbed several bags and carried them back to the kitchen. Lost in her task, she didn't notice anyone behind her until they were very close. "Would you bring me more bags while you're here?" she asked, thinking it was one of the soldiers dropping off some of their harvest. "I don't think so." An unfamiliar and unfriendly voice sounded from behind her. Sky turned and immediately locked eyes with his stranger. "Out," he ordered. He was a privateer and wanted their craft. She couldn't let that happen, but she didn't know how he would attack. He was just standing there, blaster aimed at her, not moving. She needed him to move to see how he moved. She moved straight toward him. He flinched back, feet shifting and centering under him quickly. He was used to defending himself or fighting directly. Either way, she would need to hit hard and fast. "Don't think of it. In your condition, one tap on the head and you're gone. I know your life isn't much worth living, but it's better than trying to stop me." She realized he thought she was a harbinger. She inwardly smiled from the confirmation that her disguise worked. She also realized she may have the upper hand. He moved to the side and tilted his head toward the door. The space was tight. The passage would require she get close enough to him to knock the blaster out of his hand. The strike would need to be hard and fast. She moved as directed, eyes locked to his, until she got close enough. At that moment, she purposely broke eye contact and looked past him to where she needed to move. She kept watch out of the corner of her eye, and as she hoped, his eyes shifted to that direction also, just for a moment. She looked up and flinched, pretending to see something that startled her. He jerked to look. The moment she needed, she turned, arm jabbed the hand holding the blaster sharply away from her. She felt the wrist snap, the fingers went limp, the blaster bounced off her hand as it moved. The man growled loudly. "You're ended!" He screamed and swung. She dodged, countered with an elbow to his nose. He staggered back. Tears filled his eyes from the blow, and he tried to clear them. She tried another strike, but the man recovered too quickly. He countered by dodging her strike, then grabbed her arm as it missed him, yanked, then grabbed her by the back of the neck and smashed her head against the closest wall. The impact stunned her. She felt a pop in her shoulder, then searing pain. Her shoulder was dislocated, making it hard to breathe. Another push sent her flying across the room. She turned and tucked her shoulder to protect it from further damage. The impact still hurt, but it also helped clear the fog from being stunned the moment earlier. She landed on the floor and immediately spotted the blaster lost by the man. The man grabbed a metal bar, turning to her, already swinging. She reached for the blaster with her good hand, no time to see if it was set to stun or blast, and shot. The impact knocked him into the air. A second shot from behind him sent him spinning until he hit the ground. He slumped. Sky knew he wouldn't get back up. She looked up from the privateer, expecting to see one of the soldiers, but the man standing there was another stranger. Her arm snapped, aimed right at him. The man snapped to point his blaster at her, but was speaking at the same time. Whoa, whoa, I was trying to help. I don't want to hurt you, he explained, his hand holding his blaster open, leaving the weapon dangling safely from his thumb. The other hand raised in surrender. She kept the blaster pointed at him, arm rigid, breathing heavy, pain everywhere. She watched him. He was covered in a spacesuit. A nice one. He had money and wasn't going to let the stench or dirt of this place soil his actual skin. She could work with this. Look, I see you're hurt. I'm a medic. I can help, he offered and stepped toward her. Don't touch me, she said quickly, out of reflex. She'd been injured before. This wasn't new to her. She also knew judgments hurt more when she was already in pain. The man stilled, watching her a moment. Your arm is dislocated. It needs to be fixed before it damages circulation and eventually the tissue. I know, I can do it, she explained as she used her feet to push herself to one of the walls so she could sit up. The leg below her dangling arm slid under it to move it into the right position. The whole time, she kept the blaster pointed right at him. I just need to wait until my friends return. Until then, we stay just like this, okay? Her voice made her words a warning, not an actual request. The man slowly nodded. She couldn't see his face clearly with a spacesuit shield across it. He was smiling, though. His face seemed relaxed. There was a kindness to him that pulled at her. She hoped he'd been truthful, but she couldn't take a chance believing him in her condition. She heard movement at the back of the craft, several feet, voices. They were returning. Soon, she could fix her pain. She could finish her work. She could get back to Kyla and work toward getting the medication she needed. There was a ringing in her ears and darkness at the edges of her eyes. The general was behind the new man. The new man turned, and they shook hands. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but knew they knew each other. The new man was safe enough. She didn't have much time left as the darkness closed. She took some deep breaths to prepare. She breathed in deep and held it, leaned forward hard and fast into her arm that was braced against her leg, felt the sharp pain, then the snap. The pain instantly eased, but the darkness closed in anyway. She expected the sting of her head hitting the metal floor, but it never came. She felt arms around her. She tried to force her eyes to stay open, but they fought back. She saw eyes, kind eyes, watching her for a moment, then nothing. Sometime later, Skye woke, her eyes heavy, her bed felt weird. She needed to get up, needed to get to training, needed to earn an internship before it was too late. She heard an unfamiliar hum. The room was too bright. Where was she? The fog of sleep slowly lifted. The memories came back in a rush. The trade port on Suenia, the warship, Kyla. She needed the medication. She was preparing the antibiotics. Mushrooms. She needed to finish preparing the mushrooms. She pushed herself up. In the 3 days since arriving on the warship, she barely let herself sleep. Passing out had her completely disoriented. Something clattered above her. There was a sting in her arm. A tube was attached where she felt the sting, connected to the helix, giving her something. Whatever it was, others needed it more than her. She tapped the screen to stop the flow before pulling the tube off her skin. No, don't pull that out, an unfamiliar voice called. Someone rushed toward her, and she flinched. Instinctively, she pulled her legs up, gritted through the ache in her shoulder to wrap her arms around her legs to be as small as possible. I don't need it. Don't waste the resources. She got her bearings. She was back on the warship in the medical suite. She glanced over. Kyla was still breathing, still not awake. Vital signs strong. She looked down at herself. She sniffed. She didn't smell like Tractaris anymore. Was wearing a patient's gown that was shapeless, extended past her knees, and sleeves down to her elbows, not the harbinger robes. Her eyes leveled at the man sitting in front of her on the bed and squinted. He smiled at her look. A dimple in his cheek distracted her. The scan I ran tells me differently. When was the last time you ate? That would be none of your business. Should she admit not since arriving on the warship? It didn't look like these men had any resources to spare for an uninvited guest. The man nodded. I'll take that as an it's been a while. Sky watched him. It was the same man in the spacesuit, she was sure. She hadn't gotten a good look at his face, but he moved the same. She already knew he was wealthy. Looking at him objectively, his features were symmetrical, strong jaw, full head of dark hair. Well built, he would be considered handsome. What she didn't know was what he was doing on a rogue warship. She moved to get off the bed. I need to finish preparing the mushrooms, she explained. The man held her arm. I already finished preparing them. The antibiotic solution is being processed now. You can relax. Sky froze. She didn't like being touched, but didn't want to be rude. She sat back down, hoping it would make him let her go. He watched her a moment, stroked his thumb along the inside of her wrist before letting it go. She pulled her arm back, bent her legs back up, and hugged them again. From Jareth's perspective, Jareth continued to watch her. Puzzle pieces that didn't seem to make sense were starting to create a picture. This girl, wide-eyed and seemingly fragile, who escaped Suenia without harming anyone, who stopped a conflict with startling efficiency her first moments on the warship, who thought to disguise herself as a harbinger. She willingly went to a planet no one wanted to go to for needed antibiotics and now had the perfect plan to get supplies for one of the most valuable medications in the known universes. She could shoot at a master level, fought and won against a privateer with a dislocated shoulder, then reset her own arm. From her reaction to him touching her, he was starting to understand why. She was neurodivergent. He was almost sure of it. What aspects he didn't know yet, but he knew this girl would not be playing by the same rules as everyone else. Cade's assignment just got a lot more complicated. His normal charm was not working. Would he even be able to find something that did? Let me ask you a different way. Why have you not been eating? He tried, quickly understanding this was going to take a lot of trial and error. That's complicated. A chuckle from his old friend came from the door. She uses that answer a lot, the general said as he came into the room. That and I read a lot. Yep, different rules. A reader from Sowenia? When they can just ask any question and hear the answer from anywhere on the planet? What the hell was he supposed to do now? Where are the Harbinger robes? She asked the general. Jareth noticed the usually stern military leader's eyes and voice softened. They are still being decontaminated. They will be returned once they are cleaned. She nodded, then turned to Jareth. How much solution were you able to extract? Her questions redirected them both to the planned mission. He saw her start to relax when that happened. She didn't like to talk about herself? Interesting. Total extracted liquid came to 11 params. After processing, should leave just over 8. She nodded, eyes down, forehead pulled slightly. Her eyes started moving slightly, scanning something unseen. He smiled when he realized he was watching her think. That's good. Hopefully we don't use more than 5 to get what we need. That would leave 3 for you to use. If you're careful, that could last for a while. She didn't look up while she spoke. Don't you mean if you're careful? The general asked. Jareth agreed. That sounded weird. Her head shot up. No, once Kyla wakes, I'll need to leave. Like you said, if they clear the video from the port station, I will be hunted. The further I get from all of you, the safer you'll be. Jareth wanted to groan. Does this girl have any self-preservation instincts? How the hell would someone that's never been off her home planet even consider what she was planning? Then something dawned. You mentioned the limited resources on the warship. Is that why you haven't been eating? He tried to ask gently. He saw her flinch and stiffen again. She really didn't like attention. I cost you a pilot, and Rylan wasn't supposed to be here. I'm the extra mouth you don't need. Now Jareth flinched. She blamed herself for what happened at the port, not the fact that their escape had been sabotaged and she was able to get Kyla safely away regardless. Did she not see any of the unbelievable things she'd done? He didn't want to cause her any more distress, but he had to know. Why did you take Janicki hostage when you arrived? She stiffened again and looked down. It was my fault. I didn't tell Rylan before I surrendered. He had passed out, and I thought I had some time. I was wrong. The soldier needed help, and I knew no one trusted me, but there wasn't time. Something in his heart tightened. After that admission, she moved from the bed and walked over to check Kyla. Jareth knew she could see Kyla and the screen monitoring her condition from her bed. She had moved to create distance and distract them. He was starting to recognize a pattern. He waited for her to ask a question about the mission, willing the two men in the room to shift their focus on something she was comfortable discussing. How long until the antibiotic is ready? Jareth smiled. He was starting to understand her. Jareth checked the device. 2 days. She nodded, checking one of the shelves, her forehead creased, eyes moving slightly. She was thinking. Okay, another day to assist the Nuabians, one more for processing enough Melitrex for Kyla. I'll make the calculations for the remaining supply. We'll need enough for her, but General, do you have the storage I asked about? I can show you how to process it so you can have enough for your men. If we get enough, you will also be able to trade it for needed supplies. Jareth's brain had a hard time processing what she was saying. He was used to working with attractive women, but not as attractive as her without them being completely self-absorbed. She had long brown hair, wavy and wild. No artificial enhancements, no tattoo makeup or laser sculpting. She was all natural, not wanting anyone to notice her. Her thought processes, whether she realized it or not, were hurting her, seeing injuries or situations she didn't cause as all her fault. They were also rigid and unyielding in their certainty, to the point she would starve to death to not be a burden. He had a feeling she was calculating not eating into her timeline until she left. That thought caused a strange tightness in his chest and sick feeling in his stomach. He knew she would leave the moment she thought Kyla was safe and well, unless he could think of a reason for her to stay that would override her need to protect everyone. Challenge accepted. But he needed more intel, and right now he needed her walls down or at least relaxed so he could gather more. She turned and looked at the general, whom he realized also hadn't said anything since she asked the question about the storage. He got the impression he was also stunned by hearing her plan. Jareth kept his stance relaxed, completely innocent, and looked at the general also, slight smile, waiting for his answer. The general looked from the girl to Jareth, eyes narrowing like he'd just been betrayed by someone he thought would be an ally in his attempt to figure her out. Jareth turned his head a little more to hide the wink, assuring the general he was still on his side. The general stifled a tight smile and cleared his throat. We have the storage. I also confirmed they were recently attacked and in great need of help. So far, the consortium is delaying their response. We have a window that could get all the supplies you want. Jareth elbowed him to interrupt what he was about to say, saw her flinch, cleared his throat. We want all the supplies we want, Jareth assured. She relaxed. He turned to the general and nodded exaggeratedly. The general looked back at him confused, then eyes widened in understanding and nodded also. Yes, all the supplies we want. He watched her further relax, tap the helix screen, and adjust the settings to care for Kyla. Jareth tapped the general's arm and nodded his head toward the door. We'll just go and start the preparations for Niobe, he said, trying to sound casual. The general nodded. Yep, was all he added as they both started to back out of the room. I'll come help, she offered and turned to follow. Oh no, Jareth said abruptly, too abruptly. He needed to talk with Kate immediately without her knowing. She froze and looked at him, eyes squinting and head turned. He calmed himself before speaking again. All you have on is the medic gown. We'll just be getting the supplies ready, the boring stuff. Once your clothes are clean, feel free to join us. He turned on all his charm, made sure to grin just right to display his dimple, everything he used to persuade women to do exactly what he wanted. She was still gazing at him, then her eyes softened, and she relaxed into a smile. That image started blood pounding in his ears. She was breathtaking. Damn, you're good. The fog-filled brain low on his body started to tell him. Okay, I'll just keep an eye on the antibiotic until then. She offered and turned toward the helix, but never quite turning completely away from them. Jarrah felt a strange urge to stay, but duty needed to be completed first. Then he could rush back here and continue finding out as much as possible about this woman. He was liking his assignment more and more by the minute. From Sky's perspective, Sky watched out of the corner of her eye. The moment they moved out of sight, she rushed to where she concealed her own clothes and quickly dressed. She checked Kyla again before she grabbed the cylinder and followed the two men.